Okay, sorry about that. I'm back.
Very good. We are at 1 o'clock. Chair Peterson, we'll turn this over to you. From what I see, we have all members on the line with the exception of, it looks like Commissioner Sherling. I don't believe we have Pearl Ferguson on, and well, with a couple of late ads, then we're I think that's everybody.
Perfection. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, everyone, for attending our virtual opportunity meeting here to discuss our personnel. If you would, actually, what I'm going to do is just, Mr. Wilson, I'm just going to turn this right to you. You've got a little better technology than I do. I'm sitting on my phone, plus you've got everything else in front of you, and you're pretty much the agenda anyway. So with that, I'm going to defer and turn this meeting over to you, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. I will take the baton and do my best to move forward. Thank you, everybody.
Robert, can we do a roll call? I just want to make sure that Commissioner Pollock is on.
That is a good thing. I see him on there, but Michelle or Heather, if you would take a roll call.
I'll take a roll. Mr. Peterson?
I'm here, thanks.
Mrs. Sherling? Mr. Steen?
Here.
Mr. Pollock?
Here.
Mr. Breitling?
Here.
Ms. Ferguson? Mr. Burdick?
Here.
Mr. Johnner? Mickey's here for Mickey. Miss Harmon? Here. Like your background, Mickey. Mr. Monpleasure?
Here.
Mr. Benson? Mr. Prochniak?
Here.
Mr. Brooks?
Here.
Ms. Hipsher? Mr. Pappenfuss?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here, and I believe Commissioner Sherling just joined the call as well.
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first up, all of you should have received the minutes from the POC meeting of June 15th. Those were sent out last week. They were not part of the original agenda packet, but I think Heather followed up just a matter of minutes after the packet went out with a follow-up email that included the minutes. Heather, is that correct?
Yes, Robert.
Steen moves to approve the minutes.
Second. Breitling.
That was a second by Commissioner Breitling.
Yes.
Since you're running the meeting, Robert, go ahead.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Item number 2 is consider Gallagher recommendations on the PAQs. And all of these came out of the budget hearings and the budgeting process over the last couple of months. I will give a quick summary just over everything that we're looking at, and then go back and look individually for action on the 5 different positions. But briefly, the coroner and the payroll clerk both were needed for submission for PAQs, and we've now received them back from Gallagher because the positions were authorized as part of the 2021 budget. So we've got those before you. And then the 4 other positions, Veteran Service Officer, Human Resources Director, IT Director, and County Recorder, all came out of discussions that really centered around the compensation survey and the approval of the updated pay matrix. And there were these positions were identified as being significantly out of market for comparable positions, and the commission not only directed staff to go back and update these PAQs, but also individually from and separate from adopting the matrix overall, also approved an allocation to fund moving the salary position of those 4 positions. So those job descriptions were submitted to Gallagher. They have returned the PAQs, and that is what is before you for your consideration today. So that's an overview of how we're going to move through that. My plan is I would go through each individual position, look for any questions that you may have, and then look to take action on each position. So with that as sort of a basis, are there any overall questions before we get into the specifics? Okay, hearing no questions.
So Robert, it's
Mr. Wilson.
Commissioner Pollock speaking. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, Commissioner Pollock, please go ahead.
So is this when I can ask a question about the coroner position, or would you like to wait until you go through each one of these?
I was planning to go through each one of them, and coroner would be the first up, so I think we're just a matter of seconds away from jumping into that particular position.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking back to our budgeting when we were in the budget, and I don't remember that we changed the coroner to a full-time position or budgeted for that. And so I'm not quite sure how we should handle that or what my thinking should be on that.
Okay.
Does anybody have the minutes from this is Rick, and from the meeting to verify where we're at with that? I don't recall, so.
My recollection, and I don't believe that.
Somebody needs to put their computer on mute or their microphone on mute.
My recollection, and this I'm happy to be corrected, that one the coroner position was not dealt with at the budget hearing, because that had been separately dealt with as its own standalone item at a commission meeting prior to the budget hearings. And again, I can certainly go back and find those minutes prior to getting into the 3:30 commission meeting, but that was again, that was a job description that was developed with Dr. Baird and brought forward for consideration by the board to forward to Gallagher to have that graded within the PAQ structure. But if I misspoke in my opening comment saying that was all part of the budget hearings, that one was dealt with separately as a standalone commission item at a meeting prior to budget hearings.
This is Deputy Brooks speaking. Just to piggyback on what was just said, I'm actually looking right now at an email from Mr. Wilson from September 2nd that one of the first lines based on job description PAQ review was in fact the coroner, based on a description prepared by Dr. Baird. That was one of the first lines in this letter, based on the whole Gallagher review.
Right, and Robert, I'm going to pull up the July minutes, because that's when the commission decided to forward the position to Gallagher.
Okay, thank you.
I'll pull up the commission minutes.
Well, and I think at this point, clearly we're into this, the commission, or the discussion of the coroner position. So I think Heather may have the ability, if you're pulling that up, we'll have the ability to share your screen when you have that located. But that's my recollection of how that position and the discussion around that position moved forward. If there are any other questions or comments, happy to entertain them. Mr. Montplaisir, you have your hand up.
As regards the budget, that hadn't come up at that time, I don't believe. And so the budget has 35,000 in there for the coroner contract.
And I think, and you are right, and now that we are into this discussion and refreshing my memory, we had taken that action, the board had taken that action as a standalone agenda item prior to going into budget hearings, but at that time you didn't have the PAQ back from Gallagher, so we did not know where that was going to be graded as Gallagher reviewed the position.
So, Robert, can I jump in here?
Please.
So, I mean, I guess I'm just a little confused as well, because I don't recall us ever having any discussion of needing a full-time coroner. And, you know, I don't know how many hours Dr. Baird worked, but I was always under the impression it was pretty minimal. So now we're going to, if that's the idea, I guess I just don't know how that works. And then the PAQ that came back on it clearly is not to replace a physician. The salary wouldn't support that. So, I just wondered, and I don't know that this is the place to have that conversation, but, and I know you did do a little investigation, Robert, but should we be doing our own autopsies down here? I mean, we are the largest metro in the state. Would there be any kind of a cost savings or advantage? Certainly a convenience of going to Bismarck or Grand Forks, but it seems like we took this one step, but we never discussed A, whether or not this was going to be a physician we were going to do autopsies, and two, B, do we need another full-time coroner? It's a pretty small department, so adding a full-time position without making any review seems a little, premature. But
Robert, can I read the minutes from July 6th? There's a paragraph in there, and I remember the discussion on this. So,
Heather, I was
Yep.
hoping you were going to get into that. Commissioner Sterling, I would get back to all of your questions, your comments, but I do think that the minutes that Heather has in front of her might be relevant here.
So there was a motion made and seconded to prepare a PAQ, and this was July 6th, and then to forward it to Gallagher for classification. And then there was discussion right before the motion about discussion on the fiscal impact in appointing a full-time position, but that there could be some adjustments made to other positions within the office if necessary. And then Mr. Peterson said the commission could possibly promote someone from within the office or could choose to advertise for the position. And I remember there was obviously the discussion about if this was to go to a full-time position, that maybe one of the two deputy coroners may not be needed. So the position that Christie's in and the position that Darren's in, that if there was a full-time coroner, that maybe the rest of the office structure might have to be adjusted. There was that discussion prior to you agreeing to forward the PAQ to Gallagher for classification. There was also discussion about, as Mr. Montplaisir said, about the money being in the budget for the contract, which, Dr. Baird's been paid for. And then if this position went to full-time and it ended up being more than $35,000, that we would have to, the commission would have to do a budget adjustment and money would come out of the general fund. That's what I remember. That's what's per the minutes here.
so then is
Okay.
the idea that if someone was hired from the outside, that somebody that's already employed would be losing part of their position?
Well, you really, the board, you really didn't delve into it real deep, but I remember that was part of the discussion.
So I've got a little input here I want to share. I still have two hands up that have been up for a few minutes that I want to recognize of Commissioner Steen and Mr. Mottpleasure. Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, my discussion back then, and I'm glad Heather brought up those minutes. But as I recall, the discussion was we had the questions about who has, what are the requirements for the coroner, and we went through that. Does not have to be a physician. Could be the sheriff. Could be anybody. They had some various requirements. And the discussion, as I recall it, was that would our deputy chief coroner or assistant coroner qualify? And the answer was yes. So Christy would qualify. And if she was the candidate, then we wouldn't probably have the need to hire anybody else if an internal candidate was appointed to that position. So then it would be basically an adjustment. We didn't have a PAQ for the position, so we had to have that completed regardless. And if Christy was the candidate, then it would probably just work out where we wouldn't have to hire any additional staff. But that's just my recollection.
So here's a little bit of background that I would offer up, and Commissioner Sherling, I hope this provides some answers to your questions. If not, please follow up with questions. Is that I had been working with Dr. Baird for a number of months leading up to the beginning of July. And that really consisted primarily with understanding that he was looking at a time, some point in the not too distant future, to retire. And the most direct first look at potentially replacing his position was reaching out to Sanford and Essentia and seeing if there was a willingness or a interest in partnering with between the county and either of the health systems to hire a coroner / forensic pathologist, where we would potentially be able to conduct our own autopsies in Cass County rather than having working with the medical school for conducting the autopsies. Worked with Birch early on of what would be required, and there were some there would have to be some authorizations and some reviews that would be needed, and it would be a unique situation if that were to come to pass, but it was not beyond the realm of the possible. So I reached out again to both Sanford and Essentia to see if there was interest in that. It took a little while, but got finally towards the end of June, beginning of July, got the word back from both health systems that they just were not interested. For whatever reason, it wasn't a good fit for them internally at that time. And I was working with most directly with Chair Peterson and Dr. Baird through that process. Through the getting that definite word back from both health systems, that's when Dr. Baird then presented his letter of retirement with the effective date of the end of August. And with that, when that was presented, that really led to us bringing the agenda item to you at that first meeting in July, where we looked to get the PAQ going, that really get a PAQ identified by Gallagher, and as a step needed before then, we needed to get a job description for a full-time coroner, because we had not had that, because we'd had Dr. Baird in the position on a part-time status for so many years. So the first step was that we and I hope you all can hear me. My screen just froze up. So we did we got the direction at the beginning of July to develop the job description from the coroner's office and then with that job description, then forward that to Gallagher for review and classification within the PAQ system. And that was what we did, and so that's why it's coming before you in this form today. And again, as we're getting into the specifics of these conversations again, I misspoke when I introduced this overall item at the beginning and saying it was part of the budget hearing. That discussion again was a standalone item at the beginning of July. And at this point, I see that Chair Peterson has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So first, I think we're turning this into a commission meeting. It's just an analysis of what the job is and what it should be paid. But just to sort of maybe try to end this conversation, I think the reality is Christie's been doing this job. If you recall, our Dr. Baird had some medical issues, and he was basically gone for a series of months. Here's how this needs to go. Unless we are compelled somehow otherwise with some amazing candidate, I would contend that Christie's going to take over as coroner. If we do anything else, if we need to back up this conversation about a year plus or minus, Mr. Wilson, you started getting into that regarding if we convert this thing into a medical position with a full-time medical officer and do everything internally, as Commissioner Shirley is talking about, the state right now can't find anyone to do that. If we want to turn this into a coroner's office where we do autopsies, so we can save ourselves the trouble and time of shuffling those that have passed up to other areas, be it Grand Forks or be it Bismarck, the investment is going to be in the multi-millions. Further, the staffing position is going to have to be a $250,000 to $500,000 a year position. I contend that Christie's been doing an amazing job. What we need to do is transition her to the coroner, call this done again, unless we find someone else who applies for this job that's incredibly compelling. Otherwise, that's what needs to happen. So I'll just stop there.
And it looks like Commissioner Steen has his hand raised, and Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Robert. I basically echo what Chair Peterson had to say, and what we're doing here is approving the PAQ as delivered, and we can certainly take up the position itself at the commission meeting. So I'm going to move that we approve the PAQ as provided, and we can take up the position at the commission meeting at this meeting.
This is Commissioner Breitling, but until there's a second, I would withhold any comment.
It's a motion.
Is there a second?
Jim seconds.
My recollection is that our conversations with Bismarck told us that the position of coroner should not be a medical position. It's the eyes and ears of the field for the pathologists who are going to perform autopsies later on. And that the idea that we need an MD or PhD or some type of forensic pathologist is astronomically costly. And I would support the motion that's been made and seconded.
If I may offer one quick comment, I would just say that Mr. Burdick has done quite a bit of research into the statutory requirements of a coroner, as well as had a number of conversations with the state medical examiner regarding the requirements, and that was included in your briefing packet. But understanding that there's a motion and a second on the floor, I will allow that to go if there are no other questions.
Commissioner Pollock with a question.
Commissioner Pollock.
Are we to think that Dr. Baird was performing the D62 level work in his position?
Dr. Baird was working on a contract on a part-time contract basis, and the full-time operation of running the office was really in the deputy coroners. To go back and classify at this point how his level of activity would fit into a PAQ structure, because it just was not ever classified as such. I would have a difficult time trying to identify that within the PAQ structure.
All right, thank you.
Chair Peterson has his hand up.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollock, I think what's going to happen is the reality is going to strike us that we had a steal of a deal for a number of years with Dr. Baird. And if you back up to when you were elected prior, sir, we had this dialogue, and this is going back 4 or 6 years now. But I think at that time we sort of came to the realization that, again, he isn't a full-time employee, but boy, oh boy, we got a heck of a guy for tens of thousands rather than a lot more. So I'll just stop. Thanks, Mr. Wilson.
So again, we have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Second position we're looking at is the payroll clerk. And this is one that did come out of the commission action as part of the budgeting process. Included in the budget is a payroll clerk that's new, a new position for Cass County, and so that was submitted to Gallagher for review and identification, and that's come back with a grade recommendation as a B23. Commissioner Peterson.
I defer to Mr. Montplaisir on this one. What do you think, Mr. Montplaisir? Are we going to A, be able to find somebody, and B, find someone that's able to do the job? It seems like we could, but you're my resident accounting expert, so give me your opinion, please, sir.
Yes, I think we can on both accounts.
Mr. Wilson.
It's a fairly common position throughout both government and private, so.
Commissioner Steen.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Right, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Moving on now, we've got a number of positions that are currently in the budget and staffed, but again, as part of the discussion of the new matrix, these were positions that were identified as being significantly off of the market median, and so not only was there direction to go back and have the PAQs reviewed, but again, separate from the costs identified and approved of implementing the overall matrix, there was an amount, $100,000, that was allocated to funding the regrading of these 4 positions. The table that was distributed late on Friday describes how much of that amount was utilized as part of the process of Gallagher going back and regrading those 4 positions. Again, the 4 positions are Veteran Service Officer, Human Resources Director, Information Technology Director, and County Recorder. So going down my list on the agenda, I would start with the Veteran Service Officer. The position is currently graded at a C42. The grade recommendation is a D61. Are there any questions or comments on that?
Mr. Wilson.
Commissioner Steen?
Thank you. As far as the PAQs, I'm not going to question where they come in at. The only question I have is, do we approve these? Do we have anywhere in here the recommended steps that each individual is going to be placed in at these PAQs? Are they going to come in at the current step where they're at, or how is that going to work?
These would, and I would defer to Mike if he needs to correct me, but really these positions would be moved to the new step, but then would be incorporated as we transition to the overall new matrix at the beginning of 2021.
So to answer your question, I think they would be treated the same as everybody else who were brought into their new pay scale at the step closest to what they're currently paid. So I think in the chart, it showed the veteran service going from C42 step 4 to D61 step 1.
Are there any questions? Without any questions, is there a motion?
Can we consider all four of these in one motion?
Yes, if you would like to consider all four in one. The question from Commissioner Breitling, if anybody couldn't hear it, was can you consider all of these in one motion? And if that is a
Mr.
motion,
Wilson,
Chair Peterson.
Mr. Wilson, I would ask the committee if they've got any comments before we go to not to disrespect Commissioner Breitling, but just to make sure no one else has any outstanding questions. I don't, but just in case.
Are there any comments or questions about dealing with all four of these with a single motion?
No, I think
This
that's
is
a good
Mike.
idea, Commissioner Pollock.
I guess I'm just wondering if we want to go through all four positions before we make a motion.
That's true. Certainly can do that. So I take it that I'm not hearing any questions with regards to the Veteran Service Officer position. The next one on my agenda is the Human Resources Director. That is currently graded at a D61. The grade recommendation was a D62. That was later upgraded to a D63. Really the reason that was later upgraded and quite frankly we looked at asked them to take Gallagher to take another look at that is there were two positions, the HR director and the IT director, that were respectively 34 and 21% below market, and the initial recommendation was for a single grade increase. And if the overall intent that we heard coming out of the budget hearing was to really impact the positions that were furthest off of market, and we just would not have done that with a single step increase. So that and when we asked that question or asked for that follow-up dialogue with Gallagher, it took them, I would say, all of about 15 minutes to agree, and they came back and ultimately so that again to look strictly at the HR director position here, currently a D61, following that that conversation, the recommendation is at a D63. Mr. Montplaisir.
Just as a comment, because these two were so low, I visited with the city of Fargo to find out what their range is for these two positions, and not that we're trying to chase Fargo, but our current scale for both of these positions, the high point of the scale was lower than the low point of the city of Fargo positions. So they were quite a bit out of whack.
I kind of think that we made the decision, at least inferred that we made the decision to approve all this when we authorized the action at in the budget for this. So, you know, I continue to support what it is that we're doing here.
Warren County Recorder.
That's the next one. We'll, IT Director next. Without further questions, I would move on to, again, and this is just information at this point, of reviewing the Information Technology Director position. Current grade is a D63. Original recommendation when that was submitted was for a D64. With that follow-up conversation, very similar to what we just described for the HR director, they came back with a recommendation of a D72. Okay, and not hearing any questions on that, again, would move forward just for.
Derek. Okay. Hi.
I'm sorry.
My name is Kayla, and I am currently locked out of my Frame account. Hipsher, HIPSHER.
Moving on to the county recorder position. Again, this is the fourth one that staff was directed to take another look at and resubmit for Gallagher for a PAQ consideration. Currently graded at a D61, and the recommendation that came back from Gallagher for the PAQ was to move that to a D62. So that is just really a summary of the actions of what staff undertook following the budget hearings regarding those four positions, and so we bring those now to the Personnel Overview Committee for any action you may wish to take. The suggested motion is on the memo, and again, I would look for any questions. See Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Robert. I am just going to make the motion to move to accept the PAQ recommendations of Gallagher Benefits and incorporate the position grades into the county pay metrics effective January 1, 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
I will second it with the understanding that that includes the incorporation of the STEP recommendations.
Yes.
I concur.
Was that your intent, Mr. Steen?
That's in the motion, Dewey.
Yes.
Okay, with that clarification, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Members of the Personnel Overview Committee, thank you very much. Without any other questions or comments, that concludes our business.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.